My father taught me that a man protects his family. He said it so many times, at so many dinner tables, in front of so many people, that I stopped hearing it as a sentence a long time ago. It became background noise. Like a hymn you've sung so often the words stop meaning anything and it's just sound in your mouth. He said it at my high school graduation. He said it the night I proposed to Renee. He said it at our wedding rehearsal dinner, holding a glass of sweet tea like it was a gavel, making sure everyone in that banquet room heard him. A Whitmore man protects his own. I wrote it on the inside of my brain in permanent marker. And then, on a freezing Wednesday morning in March, I stood in a subway car packed with strangers, watched my 62-year-old father grab my 9 months pregnant wife by the arm and pull her out of her seat. And I said absolutely nothing. Not one word. I need you to sit with that for a second, because I have been sitting with it for a very long time. Let me back up, because you need to understand who Gerald Whitmore is before you can understand what that morning cost us all. My father grew up in West Philadelphia, the third of 5 children in a row house on Haverford Avenue, where his grandmother kept the downstairs and rented the top floor to church friends and cousins cycling in and out of the city. He will tell you that story anywhere, anytime, at family reunions, at barbecues. From the pulpit on a third Sunday, when the sermon pivots towards sacrifice, and he needs an example of someone who made it through something. Yes, the pulpit. Gerald Whitmore has been a deacon at Mount Calvary Baptist Church on Germantown Avenue for 17 years. 17 years of standing at the door shaking hands. 17 years of sorting things out quietly. 17 years of being the man people nodded at when something needed to be handled. The Germantown community knew Gerald Whitmore the way they knew the fire station on Chelton. Steady, loud when it needed to be. Always there. My mother Carol, 60 years old, met my father at a church picnic at Cobbs Creek Park in 1988. She was 22, he was 25. She will tell you she knew in the first 10 minutes. My father will say he made her wait 3 months before he called. Let her know I wasn't desperate. They laugh every time they tell it. It is a good story. It is the kind of story that makes you want to come from a family like theirs. I did come from that family. I am their only son, which, if you know anything about black families in West Philadelphia, means I was loved loudly and watched closely and expected to perform accordingly. Not perform like a circus. Perform like a Whitmore, which meant carry yourself right, respect your elders, work hard, go to church, and under no circumstances embarrass this family in public. My name is Marcus Whitmore. I am 33 years old. I teach 11th grade American history at Dunbar High School in North Philadelphia. I have been doing this work for 6 years. I believe in it the way some people believe in weather, not because I decided to, but because I have never once stood in front of a classroom and felt like I was in the wrong place. I met Renee Okafor at a mutual friend's birthday dinner at a West Indian restaurant on Baltimore Avenue in August 2016. She was 24, I was 26. She was wearing a yellow dress and arguing about typography with someone she had just met, which I found unbelievably attractive. She is a freelance graphic designer. She is meticulous and precise and funny in the way that sneaks up on you where the room is already laughing before you realize she made the joke. We dated for 2 years, got engaged in 2018, married in the summer of 2019 at a small venue in West Oak Lane, about 80 people, good food, live music, my father crying in the front row, which remains one of the top 5 most surprising things I have ever seen. We moved into our apartment on Cedar Avenue in West Philadelphia in 2020. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, windows that look out over the neighborhood. We painted it ourselves and furnished it slowly because we refused to go into debt for furniture. My father called it modest. Renee's mother called it perfect. I called it home. In June of the previous year, Renee found out she was pregnant. We were not trying just, living our lives and trusting the timing. When she came out of the bathroom holding the test, she didn't cry. She sat down next to me on the couch, handed it to me, and said, "Okay, so we're doing this." We were doing this. The pregnancy was textbook through the first 2 trimesters. By March, Renee was 38 weeks, full term, due March 22nd, enormous and uncomfortable and still sharper than most people I know. She could not ride the subway for more than 15 minutes without needing a seat. Her back had been in a low, grinding protest since week 32, and standing on a moving train felt, in her words, like someone tightening a belt around her spine every time they hit a curve. My parents had been around more than usual since the 3rd trimester, my mother particularly stopping by with food, attending appointments, checking in. Patricia Whitmore is the kind of woman who shows up. It is one of the best things about her. My father showed up too, less warmly, if I'm being honest. Gerald Whitmore had never fully warmed to Renee. This was not my imagination. She had never done anything to earn his coldness. She called him Mr. Whitmore after 5 years of marriage. She showed up to every family gathering with grace he didn't earn. But she is not someone who rearranges herself on command. And my father has built his entire identity around rooms that rearrange for him. He never knew what to do with a woman who simply wouldn't. Over 5 years, Renee had catalogued it quietly, the way a suggestion from her became an argument, while the same idea from someone else became a good one. The way he forgot what she said and remembered everything my mother mentioned. Small things. Consistent. The kind of pattern you don't name out loud, because naming it out loud sounds like you're looking for a fight. We had not named it. The morning of Wednesday, March 13th, was cold in the particular way Philadelphia in March is cold. Not dramatic winter cold, the kind of damp, grey cold that has worn out its welcome and knows it. Upper 20s, sky the colour of old concrete. Renee had a prenatal appointment at 10:15 a.m. at Jefferson University Hospital on Walnut Street. She had asked me to come. I had taken the morning off school. My parents had called the night before and asked to join us. My mother wanted to be there, and where Carol went, Gerald came. The 4 of us met on the Market-Frankford Line platform at the 52nd Street station at 9:20 a.m. My mother was already there, bundled into a tan wool coat, holding 2 paper cups of coffee she had brought from home in a tote bag. She handed one to Renee immediately, rubbing her arm with both hands. "How are you feeling, baby? You look tired?" I'm okay," Renee smiled the way she does when she means it. "Back's been acting up, but I got some sleep." My father was at the far end of the platform, hands in his coat pockets, watching the tracks. He turned when we walked over. He gave me a pound and pull hug, the kind that is more muscle memory than warmth. He nodded at Renee. "Renee, morning." "Mr. Whitmore." That was the full exchange. The train came in at 9:24. We boarded a car that was maybe 2/3 full. Morning rush had thinned slightly, but there were still commuters, a few high school students, some early shift workers heading downtown. Renee moved carefully through the door, one hand on the rail. She was wearing a charcoal maternity coat and the expression of a woman conserving energy. There were no 4 seats together, which was fine. My mother and I moved toward the center pole. My father moved ahead toward a pair of seats near the door. And then it happened. A man near the window, late 40s, work boots, reading something on his phone, glanced up, saw Renee, and stood without being asked. "Please." His hand swept toward his seat. "Go ahead." Renee thanked him, directly, warmly, no performance. That is how she does everything. She lowered herself into the seat with the particular slow-motion care of a woman who has learned to treat every sit-down as a minor event. She exhaled. I watched her shoulders drop. My mother smiled at the man. I gave him a nod. My father looked at the seat. Then he looked at my mother. Then he looked at the seat again. Carol had been standing at the pole for maybe 45 seconds. She is 60 years old. She is in good health. She walks every morning in the neighborhood. I have seen her do it for years. She is not fragile. She is not in pain. She is a healthy 60-year-old woman standing on a train for what would have been, at most, another 10 minutes. I saw the calculation happen on my father's face. I recognized it. I had seen it my entire life. The moment Gerald Whitmore decides that what he wants is what is correct, and begins organizing the world to confirm it. He leaned over Renee. "Let your mother-in-law have that seat." Not a question, not a request. A pronouncement. Renee looked up at him. She did not answer immediately, which is one of the things I love most about her. She does not react. She assesses. I just sat down. "Mr. Whitmore." Carol's tired. Her feet are bothering her. He reached down and put his hand on Renee's forearm. And then he pulled. Not violently, not in a way that would leave a mark. But it was a pull. Deliberate. Directional. The kind that assumes compliance before consent is given. Renee's belly, our daughter in there, 38 weeks old, shifted forward with the motion. The car went quiet. I mean quiet the way a room goes quiet when something has happened that cannot be unhappened. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. The man who had given up his seat, the one in the work boots, stared at my father with an expression I will not forget. Somewhere behind me, someone breathed in sharply, and I stood there, 4 feet from my wife. I want to be precise about this, because I have been precise about it in every conversation I have had about it since. I was standing 4 feet from my wife. I saw my father's hand close around her arm. I watched her body tilt forward. I processed what was happening in real time. And I stood there with my mouth open and said nothing, did nothing, moved for no one. Renee stood. She put her hand on the overhead rail. Her face was calm in the way that is not actually calm, the way that is control. I knew that face. That face was doing work I should have been doing. My mother sat down, not with enthusiasm. She sat the way a person sits when they're not sure sitting was the right call, but the decision has already been made without them. She didn't look at Renee. She looked at her hands. My father straightened up like a man who had just completed a reasonable errand. And across the aisle, 1 row back, a teenage girl in a bright orange puffer jacket was holding up her phone. She had been recording for at least 30 seconds. None of us knew it yet. The prenatal appointment at Jefferson University Hospital went fine, which felt obscene under the circumstances. The baby was head down, heartbeat strong. Renee's blood pressure was elevated. Dr. Patricia Osei gave me a look that was professional and pointed, but within manageable range. They sent us home with instructions to rest, reduce stress, and come back immediately if contractions started. Reduce stress. Sure. My parents sat in the waiting room the entire time. When we came out, my father asked how it went. My mother hugged Renee. I told them it went fine. We took separate ride shares home. In the car, Renee sat with her hands folded in her lap and looked out the window. She did not perform calm. She did not cry. She did not say a word until we were back in the apartment, coats off, shoes by the door, and I had sat down across from her at the kitchen table. Then she looked at me. "Marcus, I know. I need you to tell me what just happened." "My father." "I know what your father did. I was there." A pause. "I'm asking what happened to you." There it was. Clean, no decoration, no raising of her voice, just the question underneath all the other questions. What happened to me? I froze. That was the truth. It happened too fast. That was the excuse. I was sorry. That was the only part that was entirely real. She listened to all of it without a word. When I finished, she looked at me for a long moment. "Marcus, I'm 38 weeks pregnant. Your father grabbed my arm and made me stand up on a moving train. And you froze." She said it the way you say a fact you need someone else to also understand is a fact. "I need you to know that I'm going to remember that." She went to lie down. I sat at the kitchen table and didn't move for a long time. I did not call my father that day. I drafted the call 17 times in my head. Started calm. Talked myself into firmness. Talked myself back into deference. Maybe it wasn't as bad as And then I remembered Renee's hand on that overhead rail and scrapped every version. The next morning I was back at Dunbar, teaching second period. My students wanted to discuss why nations form alliances that drag them into wars they didn't choose. I stood at the whiteboard with a dry erase marker and thought, oh, the irony. I texted my father at 2:17 p.m. on Thursday. Dad, what happened yesterday wasn't okay. Renee is 9 months pregnant. She needed that seat. I need to talk to you. He texted back at 4:45 p.m. Your mother's feet were hurting. Renee's young. That's how it works. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable. I stared at that text for a long time. That's how it works. I am a history teacher. I know what that sentence has been used to defend across centuries. I have a whole unit on it. I showed the texts to Renee. She read them, nodded slowly, handed the phone back. Okay. Okay, what? Okay. She looked at me steadily. Now I know exactly who I'm dealing with. I should have understood then that Renee Whitmore was building something. She just hadn't told me yet. I want to tell you something about my wife and my father, because it matters for everything that comes next. Gerald Whitmore had never liked Renee. I had known this for years and done the thing I was trained to do with inconvenient knowledge. I filed it somewhere quiet and told myself it wasn't as bad as it looked. I was wrong about that. I had been wrong about it for 5 years. Over those 5 years, Renee had experienced things I had watched happen and refused to name. The way my father talked over her at family dinners and then quoted her idea back 10 minutes later as if he'd thought of it himself. The way he asked about my work without ever asking about hers, even though she had built an independent business from nothing and was genuinely excellent at it. The way he said your wife to me when he meant Renee, as if using her name, required an acknowledgement of her as a full person that he was not prepared to give. Small things, individually dismissible, collectively a pattern. And I had seen that pattern every time it happened. I had registered it. I had felt the low hum of wrongness that comes with it. And I had said nothing, because my father was my father, because a Whitmore man doesn't make scenes, because it was easier to smooth it over afterward than to stand up in the moment and say, this is not acceptable, and deal with what came after. Renee had been patient with me about this, more patient than I deserved. And now I was sitting at the kitchen table on the 4th day after the train, going over work, while she moved through our apartment with the careful deliberateness of a woman who is 38 weeks pregnant and carrying more than just the physical weight. She had not brought up my father again. Not once. This is how I knew it was serious. When something doesn't matter to Renee, she says so immediately and moves on. When something matters, she goes still, like a camera focusing. She was focused. I could feel it. I just didn't know yet what she was focused on. My mother called on Friday evening at around 7. I answered in the kitchen. She asked how Renee was. Fine. She asked how I was. Fine. Then, Murphy, your father meant well. You know how he is. I knew how he was. That was precisely the problem. Mum. He grabbed Renee's arm on a public train and made her stand up at 38 weeks pregnant. I don't know how to make that mean well. Silence. She should have just offered the seat herself. Carol is her mother-in-law. I didn't have words for that. I told her I had to go, hung up, stood at the sink and turned the faucet on and off twice, which is something I do when I'm trying not to say something I can't take back. Renee was in the living room. She didn't ask who it was. Sunday, March 17th. We were eating lunch. Renee was on her laptop finishing up a branding project. I was eating leftover rice and reading on my phone. The apartment was warm. Windows slightly fogged. Outside, the city was doing its thing, cold but alive. The particular mid-March energy of a place that has survived another winter and is not going to let you forget it. It was, for about 45 minutes, a perfectly ordinary Sunday afternoon. Then Renee's phone buzzed. Then again. Then 3 more times in quick succession. She picked it up, read something, set it down, picked it up again. Marcus. The way she said my name. Level, like reading coordinates off a map. What? She turned the phone and held it out to me. It was a post in a Facebook group called Philadelphia Neighbors United, a group with over 5,000 members. The post had been up since Saturday evening. Less than 24 hours, it already had 243 comments and had been shared 61 times. The post read, "Does anybody know this man? This happened on the Market-Frankford Line westbound near 52nd Street yesterday morning. A pregnant woman was pulled out of her seat by this man so another woman could sit. The pregnant woman stood the rest of the ride holding a pole at 9 months pregnant. Somebody needs to say something." Below the text was a video. 31 seconds. Shot from a phone. Hand, slightly unsteady but clear enough. Clear enough to see my father's hand close around Renee's forearm. Clear enough to see her body tilt forward with the pull. Clear enough to see her stand, gripping the overhead rail, one hand moving instinctively to her belly. And clear enough, absolutely unmistakably clear to see me, standing 4 feet away, watching, doing nothing. I watched it 3 times. The comments were what you would expect from 5,000 Philadelphia residents who have opinions and are not shy about sharing them. Most were about my father, but a meaningful number were about the man standing beside him who watched the whole thing happen and didn't move. One comment had 67 likes. "The husband is just as bad." Right there. Didn't say one word. "That poor woman." I put the phone down. Renee was watching me. How many people have seen this? It's been shared 61 times as of 2 minutes ago. Goes up every time I check. Does my father? "I don't know what your father knows." A pause. But people are starting to tag Mount Calvary's Facebook page in the comments. I need to tell you about Evelyn Hart before I tell you what came next, because she is the reason any of what came next at all. Miss Evelyn Hart was 73 years old, a retired Philadelphia Public Library branch manager who had spent 28 years at the Lovett Memorial Library on Green Street in Germantown. Born and raised in Germantown. Lived within 2 miles of where she grew up her entire life. She attended Mount Calvary Baptist Church and had for 38 years. She had been on that Market-Frankford Line car. She was sitting directly across the aisle from Renee, 2 seats down. When my father reached over and pulled my wife out of that seat, she saw the whole thing from 10 feet away. She did not pull out her phone. She is 73 years old and she is not a phone puller. What she did was look at my father, the way I am told, by multiple people who were in that car, that a woman of a certain age and a certain history looks at a man who has just done something he knows was wrong. She said 3 words, "God sees you." My father, I'm told by witnesses, flinched. He tried to play it off. He looked away, but he flinched. Miss Evelyn rode the train to its last stop, walked to her car, drove home to her apartment on Walnut Lane, and spent the afternoon thinking. By Sunday evening, someone had sent her the Facebook post. And she did something none of us expected. She commented. Her comment read, "I was on that train. I saw everything. The man in the video is Gerald Whitmore, a deacon at Mount Calvary Baptist Church on Germantown Avenue. The young woman he pulled from her seat is his daughter-in-law, 9 months pregnant. His son was standing 4 feet away. I told Mr. Whitmore on that train that God sees him. I want this community to see him too. This is not who we say we are." She signed it with her full name. 158 likes by Sunday night. By Monday morning, someone had screenshotted it and sent it to 4 members of Mount Calvary's deacon board. The church's Facebook page had 17 new comments by 8 a.m. The Germantown Neighborhood Business Association, on whose Community Advisory Council my father had served for 5 years, had received 2 emails from residents by the time their offices opened. My phone started ringing at 6:50 Monday morning. It was my father. I let it ring. He called again at 7:40, again at 8:15, by which point I was in the Dunbar parking lot watching the call come in and sitting with the question of what I actually wanted to say. I answered on the 4th call. "Marcus?" His voice was different. Lower. Something had been sanded off the top of it. Something that usually lived in the register of a man who assumes the room is already arranged for him. Dad, there's a video. I know there's a video. A pause. I need you to help me get ahead of this. I want you to feel the shape of that sentence. Not I made a mistake. Not how is Renee. Not I owe you both an apology. The first thing out of his mouth on the morning he found out 5,000 people had seen what he did was to recruit me as his crisis manager. Get ahead of it how? Dad! Talk to whoever runs that Facebook group. See if they'll take it down. And that woman, evil in heart, she goes to my church. I need to... Dad. He stopped. Renee is 38 weeks pregnant. She is going to give birth to my daughter any day now, before anything else that is happening right now. That is what is happening. And the reason any of this is on the internet is because of what you did on that train. Do you understand that asterisk? Silence. I hear what you're saying, which is the phrase people use when they have no intention of absorbing anything. But I need you to... I'm going to school. We'll talk later. I hung up, walked inside, stood in front of 31 11th graders and taught them about the Versailles Treaty, the dangers of agreements made in bad faith, the way powerful men have always found language that reframes their behavior as reasonable. The irony was not lost on me. Renee's mother, Diane Okafor, arrived from her home in Elkins Park on Monday afternoon. Diane is 58 years old, a retired occupational therapist. A woman of compressed power who has always seemed to me like someone who keeps most of herself in reserve for moments that actually require it. She walked in, set her bag down, went directly to Renee, and held her for a long time without saying anything. Then she made tea and sat at the kitchen table, and the two of them talked in low voices while I stayed in the bedroom. Around 9 that evening, Diane knocked on the door and came in. She sat in the chair by the window. I sat on the edge of the bed. I'm not here to make your life harder, Marcus. Her voice was even. I need you to know that. I know. Do you know what Renee needs right now? I thought I did. I said so. Diane looked at me with the patience of a woman who has heard a lot of men say they knew things. She needs to know that you see what happened. Not just what your father did. What happened to her? She carried that whole morning the train, the appointment, coming home, and she carried it alone because you weren't present in the way she needed. That is what you need to address, not the Facebook video, not your father's reputation, your wife. I nodded. And Marcus, she was at the door. Whatever your father does in the next few weeks to manage this situation, be very clear about which side of the line you're standing on. Renee has been watching your father treat her as an afterthought for 5 years. She has been patient, but she is not infinitely patient, and she should not have to be. She went back to the living room. I sat with that for a long time. The day after that conversation, Reverend Samuel Lattimore, the senior pastor of Mount Calvary Baptist, called my father into a meeting at the church office. I know this because my father called me afterward, voice clipped and tight. The board has asked me to step back from deacon duties temporarily while they review the situation. He said the word reviewed like it was a personal affront. They're letting that woman dictate church policy based on a Facebook post. Evelyn Hart has been a member of that church for 38 years. Dad, so have I. She told the truth. Another silence. My father's silences are different from Renee's. Hers focus inward, his push outward, like pressure looking for a release valve. I need you to call Reverend Lattimore as my son. Speak to my character. And there it was again, the second request for me to be his shield. Dad. What? I watched you grab my pregnant wife on a train. I didn't stop you. I'm not going to call your pastor and act like nothing happened. I can't do that. The longest pause of the whole conversation. You sound like her. I took a breath. I hope so, I said. And I hung up. I need to tell you about that moment because it was the first moment since the 52nd Street platform that I felt like myself, not the self I had been performing, the one underneath it. I hope so. 3 words. They came from the same place in me where I had been standing silently for 33 years while my father arranged the room, and I let him. That night I went to Renee. She was in bed reading. I sat next to her. I did not have a speech. I am a history teacher. I can construct an argument. But this wasn't a classroom. She wasn't looking for a thesis. I'm sorry I didn't stand up on that train. I've been trying to explain it to myself for days. I froze because I have spent 33 years not wanting to be the reason my father is angry. And I let that habit cost you something. It should never have cost you. That's on me. Not on the moment. On the years before the moment. She looked at me for a long time. Marcus, I know who you are. I didn't marry you because I thought you were perfect. I married you because I thought when it actually mattered, you'd show up. I'm here now. I know, she put her book down. Now be here when everything that's coming actually gets here. She was right. Something was coming. I could feel it. The Germantown Neighborhood Business Association held its regular monthly meeting on Thursday, March 20th. My father was on the agenda. He had served as a community-appointed advisory council member for 5 years. He arrived at the meeting prepared, I think, to weather the moment with the composure he had been applying to public rooms his whole life. He did not know that Miss Evelyn Hart had spent the previous 4 days writing a letter. 3 pages, handwritten on lined paper in the clear, careful script of a woman who spent 28 years helping other people find the exact words they needed. Addressed to Council Chair Bernard Ashford. She described what she had witnessed on the Market-Frankford Line on the morning of March 13th with the unsparing precision of a trained librarian who believes in primary sources. She named my father. She noted his deacon role at Mount Calvary and his position on the advisory council, and she stated clearly that she was not writing to destroy him. She wrote, "A community council member is a public role. The trust this community places in its appointed representatives is not ceremonial. What I witnessed on that train was a man use his physical authority over a 9 months pregnant woman in a way that was harmful, dismissive, and entirely beneath the standard we ask of people in positions of community trust. I am not asking that Mr. Whitmore be condemned. I am asking that this council be consistent in what it says it stands for. The measure of a community is not what it celebrates in its best moments. It is what it holds people accountable for in their worst ones." She signed it, Evelyn Louise Hart, retired, Germantown resident since 1972. Bernard Ashford read it into the record. My father was present for every word. When Bernard finished, he looked up and asked if anyone wished to respond. I was not in that room. I am telling you what 2 people who were there described to me afterward, both of whom I trust, one of whom sent me a voice memo that evening with a detailed account. My father stood up. He did not manage the moment. He did not redirect it. He did not recruit anyone. He stood up and he spoke. What Ms. Hart described is accurate. I made a decision on that train that I should not have made. My daughter-in-law was 9 months pregnant. She needed that seat. I asked her to give it up. And I did it in a way that was wrong. I'm not going to stand here and make excuses for what I did. He paused. I have spent a lot of years believing I knew what my family needed better than they did. I'm starting to understand what that has cost them. He sat down. The room was quiet for a moment. Bernard Foster said, "Thank you. Gerald, we'll note your statement in the record." The meeting moved on. My father did not call me that night. He called Renee. Renee told me about it later. She was in the nursing chair in the baby's room. We had set it up the previous month. Pale yellow walls, a second-hand dresser we had sanded and repainted together on a Saturday in January. She had her phone on the edge of the chair. I sat on the floor against the wall and listened to her describe the conversation. He called her cell directly. She saw it was him and answered. She had decided somewhere in the preceding week that she was not going to be the person who refused the call. She was going to be the person who answered and said what she actually meant. Renee, I owe you an apology. She let that sit for a moment. I'm listening, Mr. Whitmore. What I did on that train was wrong. I've been telling myself a story about it, and the story doesn't hold. You were pregnant. You needed that seat. I wanted Carol to have it. And I handled it in a way that was disrespectful. It wasn't the first time I've been disrespectful to you. Even when the other times were smaller. I know that. I want you to know I know it. Renee, by her own account, sat with that for about 10 seconds. I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Whitmore. I really do. She kept her voice even. But I need you to understand that one conversation doesn't fix 5 years. It's a start. That's all it is. And Nora should know her grandfather. So let's start from there. Good. Come Sunday, dinner. She hung up and looked at me across the room. I didn't have words right away. Did that just happen? I finally said. Yes. She looked at the ceiling. Don't make it weird. I laughed. For the first time in 10 days, I actually laughed. Renee went into labor at 4:47 a.m. on Thursday, March 21st, one day before her due date. Her contractions woke her first. She told me later she lay in the dark for 35 minutes, timing them on her phone, before she reached over and put her hand on my shoulder. Marcus, it's time. Those 3 words, I have replayed them so many times they have worn a groove in my memory. Calm and even, like she was waking me up for a flight we had planned well in advance. We had a bag packed. We had called ahead. I had the route to Jefferson University Hospital mapped 3 different ways because I am a person who plans contingencies when I'm anxious. And I had been anxious for 3 weeks. I texted my mother at 5:15 a.m. Renee is in labor, heading to Jefferson. Will update you. I did not text my father. Nora Ann Whitmore arrived at 11:38 a.m. on March 21st, 2024. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, full head of hair, the lung capacity of someone who had opinions and intended to share them from the very beginning. She is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. I know every father says that. Every father is right. Diane was in the waiting room and came in first. She held Nora and didn't speak for a long time. When she finally handed her back to Renee, her eyes were red and her voice was completely steady. Which is very Diane Okafor. My mother arrived at 1:45 p.m. She held Nora and cried without apology. Which is very Carol Whitmore. She took Renee's hand and said, "You did so good, baby, so good." And I watched Renee soften the way she sometimes does with my mother carefully, with one door open and the rest locked. My father arrived at 2:20 p.m. He walked into the room and stopped when he saw Diane on the far side of the bed. He looked at Nora, then at Renee, then at me, and for the first time in my memory, I saw Gerald Whitmore look like a man genuinely unsure of his footing. She's beautiful. He meant it. That part was completely real. Renee looked at him without rearranging her face into something accommodating. She just looked at him the way you look at something you're still deciding what to do with. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. Even, precise. He stood at a distance from the bed. He did not reach for the baby. My mother had gone still beside him. The room held all of it, the weight of the past 10 days. The apology, the call, the letter, the meeting, all of it in the air between us. At some point, without fanfare, Renee looked at him and said, "Do you want to hold her?" My father nodded. I placed Nora in his arms. She looked up at him with the complete, unfiltered curiosity of an 11-hour-old baby who has no context for any of this. She found him interesting. She grabbed his index finger with her whole fist, the way newborns do, without knowing what they're doing, and held on. My father looked down at her, and Gerald Whitmore Deacon, patriarch. The man who had never in my memory looked uncertain about anything looked like a man who understood, in that moment, that he was being given something he had not entirely earned, and intended to be worthy of it. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I want to tell you where things are now, because that is where the story actually lives. My father did not lose his deacon role permanently. After a 6-week suspension and a formal conversation with Reverend Lattimore, during which he gave the same account he had given the business association. Without deflection, he was reinstated on modified terms. He participates now in a monthly men's accountability group at Mount Calvary that Reverend Lattimore has been running for 2 years. My father does not tell me what they discuss in there. He goes every month. He has not missed a meeting. The Germantown Neighborhood Business Association kept him on the advisory council with the record of his public statement included in the minutes. The Facebook video is still up, over 4,000 views the last time I checked. The teenager who filmed it, her name is Camila. She is 17, a junior at Germantown High School. Her grandmother goes to Mount Calvary. She recognized me at a church event in April and came over. Prepared, I think, to apologize. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. I told her she had done something I had failed to do. I shook her hand. Her grandmother watched the whole thing, and I think she might have cried a little. I am not going to confirm that, but I think she might have. We reached out to Miss Evelyn Hart. Renee did, directly. Through the Facebook thread where she had commented, she sent a private message thanking her. Miss Evelyn replied the same day. Baby, I have been watching men like Gerald Whitmore move through this community my whole life. Good men who got comfortable, good men who forgot that good intentions do not excuse poor behavior. I meant what I said on that train because I have learned, after 73 years, that silence is never neutral. I hope your baby is healthy. I hope your husband found himself. Send me a picture when you're ready. Renee sent her a picture of Nora. Miss Evelyn replied with 4 words. She is perfect. Hallelujah. My father came to Sunday dinner 2 weeks after Nora was born. He and my mother arrived at 4:30. Diane was still staying with us and did not leave when they arrived, a fact I noted and appreciated. The first 30 minutes were the particular kind of uncomfortable that you just have to let exist. You cannot rush it. You cannot talk your way through it. You have to let people find their footing. By the time dinner was on the table, my mother and Diane had found each other in the kitchen and were laughing about something. I don't know what. I didn't ask. My father held Nora again after dinner, sat in the armchair in the living room while everyone moved around him. The particular low hum of a full apartment with a new baby in it. He held her the way he had held her in the hospital, with the careful deliberateness of a man who understands he has been given a second chance and is not planning to waste it. Renee sat across from him at one point, just the two of them, for about 3 minutes. While I was in the kitchen, I don't know what they said. She has not told me and I have not asked, because some conversations belong entirely to the people who had them. What I know is that when I came back into the living room, my father was looking at Renee in a way I had never seen him look at her before. Not like a variable he hadn't accounted for. Like a person. Nora is 3 months old as of this telling. She weighs 12 pounds and has discovered she can control the mood of any room she's in with her eyebrows, which she is deploying constantly and without mercy. Renee is back at her design work part-time. She has taken on 3 new clients since February. She is ferocious and rested and laughs too loud at bad television with exactly the same unapologetic energy she had the day I met her. She still calls my father Mr. Whitmore. He no longer looks at her the way he used to, like she was a problem he was managing. He looks at her like a man who finally read the room. And me. I go to work every day. I stand in front of my students sharp, funny, relentlessly opinionated young people who push back on me in ways that make me better, and I teach them history, which at its core is the study of what people do when they have power, and what it costs when they use it wrong, and what it looks like when someone finally decides to get it right. I think about that Market-Frankford Line car most mornings. I think about Renee's hand on the overhead rail. I think about Miss Evelyn Hart, 73 years old, looking my father in the eye and saying 3 words with the particular calm certainty of a woman who has never once confused silence with peace. I think about Camilla and her phone, and the way 31 seconds of footage became the thing that made a 62-year-old man sit in an accountability group every month and reckon with who he had been. I think about the version of me who froze, and I think about what I said to my father when he told me I sounded like my wife. I hope so. Some seats, once given up, cannot be taken back. Some moments you stand up for or you don't, and everyone in the car can see which one it is. My father is learning that. I learned it a moment too late. Nora is going to grow up knowing her father learned it. She's going to grow up knowing her grandfather learned it too harder and later and with more witnesses than any of us would have chosen but learned it. That's going to have to be enough. And honestly, it is. Let me ask you something directly. If you had been on that train, if you had seen what Camilla saw, what Miss Evelyn saw, what would you have done? Would you have spoken up? Would you have said something to that man right there in public? Or would you have stayed quiet and told yourself it wasn't your place? Tell me in the comments. Because I think the answer matters. I think how we respond to the small moments of wrong, the ones that happen in public. In broad daylight, in front of witnesses, that's where character actually lives. Hit subscribe if you want to stay in this community. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Like the video so more people find it, and stay close because we have more stories coming, and I promise you're going to want to be here for them. Miss Evelyn Hart said silence is never neutral. She was right.